I'd like to open it up directly to questions from the floor. We have a mic somewhere. Yes? Can we take a question? We'll start from the very front here.
Hello. I've got two questions, one directed to Ms. Price and the other, Mr. Konstantaras. Ms. Price, Mr. Jolyon mentioned the lack of political cost of the Conservative Party in pursuing the Brexit agenda, and a contributing factor has been the surprising strength of UK industry and manufacturing despite the uncertainty the Brexit vote introduced. At what point, if any, do you think industry and the economy feels the pain and affects public and political opinion, particularly if the transitional period persists, the status quo until 2020 and beyond? And my other question is to Mr. Konstantaras. Should EU nationals in the remaining EU countries be concerned about the increasing influence of the Germans and French in the absence of the pragmatic and conservative voice of the UK in the EU?
Okay, well, I'll start on the first one. Well, it's interesting what's been going on, because of course the people who are in favor of Brexit have been using the fact that the economy has done reasonably well as a way of saying, well, see, there's nothing wrong with Brexit, it's all going to be fine. But the truth is, of course, that we are growing here in the UK at a very slow pace. So 1.7 last year. If indeed the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, is right, it will just be 1.5% this year, 1.3% next year, 1.3%. So this doesn't create any real sustainable growth profile for anyone. And of course, with investment being low and so on, that is an issue. But given that the world economy is booming, and we have one of the highest, sharpest increases in world trade that we've had in ages, manufacturing has indeed benefited. The fall in the pound has helped, but we should, in theory, be doing considerably better. Instead, we are at the bottom of the league in terms of our competitors, the bottom of G7, and if we believe the OECD, we're at the bottom of the G20 in terms of growth. Now, at what point will it start affecting people individually? I mean, what's happened already is that the consumer is under real pressure because inflation has been rising and wages have not to the same extent. So disposable incomes have been declining for a number of quarters. There is already an understanding that things are getting worse for individuals, and real wages, as we know, have not increased since the crisis. Businesses are beginning to say, if we're going to be continuing to prosper, we need the customs union. So they're already putting pressure for that. So the Labour Party is talking now about a customs union. I think with that type of, the financial sector thinks they're going to get mutual recognition. They won't. So there's going to be a lot of push to do something to stay close to the single market. So I think it's the public opinion is changing too slowly for the Remainers, but it is changing, and businesses are finally putting a lot more pressure in terms of the type of Brexit that we need to have. So I think that is going on in a slow way, but finally they're waking up to what the implications of this is, and they're being very much more voluble than you can hear them a lot more than before. And if you open your newspapers, the partisan ones or any, it's now full of bad news about the economy, even though we're still growing. About retail outlets closing down, about the pressure in various areas. Yes, manufacturing doing well, but construction not doing so. House prices falling, which is what's happening right now. So it's beginning, I think, to filter through normal media a lot more. I mean, if you can find me a positive story of the last few weeks, that would be quite useful, since you are a journalist. So, over to you.
Interesting question after what I said earlier about British pragmatism. I think that what may happen now in Europe might be beneficial for Greece. President Macron's proposals are, in my mind, in the right direction in the way of governing the monetary union. They will not all his proposals, they won't come to fruition because Germany will not give in to that. But usually we would have said that Germany is the hard cop in the story. But this is a very different Germany now that they're forming this government, and that gives me hope. First, that they will change their policies very much in terms of the very strict austerity that they were demanding, and even if it doesn't change in effect because we're quite far into towards the end of the program, there still is debt relief and so on to be discussed, and there might be a new climate in that. But for me, the most important part is that we have this government in Germany, and it's a government that is more centrist than German governments were in the past. The SPD came very much towards the center, and the CDU went very much towards the center, so that they could meet. And I think the most important thing that this government can offer right now is to show that a centrist government can still function. If it does function, I think for me the big what's at play here is if they can be a good government for the Germans and then play a positive role in the European Union. So it's sad to say, but it's almost irrelevant whether Britain is there or not, because this is the big bet that's being played. And I think that the biggest danger right now comes from Italy, which is too big to ignore anymore. I mean, I remember watching Italy's debt costs rising a few years ago. Just after Greece, it reached the level that Greece had to ask for help, and it was just such a big problem that everybody said there's no problem. It was too big to tackle. Now it's very big at all levels. So the French German axis, if I could say that, will be tested very, very severely now, and we'll see what comes out of that. I don't know how the British would have helped if they were more vocal about that, and there are a whole lot of problems that the EU has had to face that were the result of British pressure to have that kind of policy, whether it was the rapid enlargement without preparation, whether it was the very close relationship with Turkey, was all these opting out and keeping things separate. Those worked politically in Britain, but we saw the results on the EU, and it was so interesting to see in the referendum debate the Turkey being the boogeyman.
Whereas it was the UK.
Whereas it was the UK that had insisted that a relationship move in that direction very rapidly. I hope that answers your question.
But the same with Eastern European workers, because we opened our doors first,
yes.
and then complained.
I'd like to take pairs of questions, if possible. But can we start here? Can you pass them? We'll take a couple of questions, and then you answer.
I want to thank you very much for this presentation. We heard about Brexit that didn't happen, and Brexit that almost has happened. Of course, these are two totally different issues, but the important issue about this is that Brexit did not happen because it would be an economic decision, while Brexit happened because it was an economic decision. And we also heard a very interesting and painful comparison between Greece and the UK, although I think it was a bit unfair and unrelated, because we're talking about two very different countries and two very different environments. But my question is the following, and I don't know who of the panelists can answer. Security has not come into the discussion seriously, and with the worsening developments in overall security, do you think that security would play a role now into changing the mindset of Brexit, without necessarily reversing it? Thank you.
Very good. So, can we take the gentleman at the fourth row behind?
Yeah, my question is for Ms. Price. I just want your opinion, really. What do you think if this transitional period will actually be until the end of 2019, 2020, or if it will actually, what do you think it will actually get any longer?
So we have a transition
Well,
period, and the big question about
okay,
security.
well, on
yeah.
security, I mean, the ambassador is absolutely right. This is now coming up on the agenda, and as we know already, between various speeches that Theresa May has made, in her first speech at Lancaster House, if I remember correctly, she said that if the Europeans don't give us what we want, then we'll stop cooperating on security. By the time she did her Florence speech, she dropped that, like lots of other things as well. And of course now, with everything that's happening, it's, you realize even more how, if you were to do anything, let's say, on the Russian issue, working alongside the rest of Europe is going to be particularly significant. So we've already said that we will continue to cooperate on security, assuming, of course, they have us. And of course, they would want that too, but it isn't going to be anything like as easy as it was before. It is, I think, focusing, or at least one hopes, that is focusing minds. But I have to say that I do still think that a lot of the members of the cabinet live in fantasy land in terms of what can be achieved, because we are so significant and important. And after all, we are a serious power, supposedly, in terms of sort of defense capabilities and what have you. But we have already, nevertheless, made some concessions too. We've agreed to put more troops near in Estonia, wherever it is, Slovakia. Well, I can't remember now when these things are happening, and pledge to also provide some more equipment ourselves, military equipment for various efforts that are being made right now in terms of boosting the security of Europe. So we seem to be we're helping the French and with whatever it is. It isn't helicopters, whatever those planes are that they needed in Africa. So we realize that actually we can't act on our own. We have to be part of this, and I do hope that it focuses minds. But as I said, I just fear a little bit that we still have a number of people who can't quite understand what those issues are in the cabinet at present. I'm not suggesting for a minute that perhaps a change of government will make that any better. But I think between now and any withdrawal agreement, I think the cooperation we need with Europe is going to probably be quite an important factor in shaping it.
If I may add to the security, my understanding in Athens is that there's agreement that nothing will get in the way of very close security cooperation, that it's irrelevant with regard to Brexit. Security in terms of terrorism and that kind of
well, yes, you do need quite a lot of those bodies to work together, and there's various forces to work together, and I'm not sure that in order for that to happen, you also may need to be accepting some wider authority above. So this is quite in terms of how things are moved around, people and the sort of intelligence that needs to circulate. So it'll be quite interesting to see how it develops. On the economic side, or a transition period, it depends how I wake up in the morning, really. And if I've had a really good night's sleep, transition will last forever. And if not, then I'm very, very miserable. I just seriously don't know. But I think the difficulty is when we get there. And I think actually security and other issues are going to be quite important in this. We might actually find that either transition lasts forever, or we end up with something which is very, 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 very close to where we are now, but without exercising any control. So by which I mean really that we end up with some sort of EEA membership, which you can't, you could be actually, even though they said there wouldn't be any more members of the EEA after Norway, but nevertheless we could practically be there. So that would probably be the best scenario if we're really leaving. The very, very best scenario is a referendum on the actual deal, which will go our way. And we see.
Okay, another round of questions. The lady here.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to declare I'm a Remainer. And there's a reason for declaring that, because I had a couple of thoughts off the back of what Mr. Konstantaras said. One of them is that, British people may be characterised skewed, blacked out by the government, which is characterised by a distinct lack of vision and pragmatism in the Brexit context. The other thing I wanted to pick up on was the benefits to the quality of life of people in Greece from their membership of the EU. The EEC as was an EU, which, no doubt, but I think for me, the focus has to be on the sustainability of that. So looking back and saying, yes, things got better in different ways, but for me, and this brings me to my question, my key concern is young Greeks in post-Brexit Britain. So a lot of Greek people came here with their children, a school age, over the last 5, possibly more years, and their children are now in their late teens and 20s. If we look at Greece now and say the quality of life for young people, the lost generation is what many people say about kids of our age, of 18, 19, 20, and in their 20s. So my question is, what about young Greeks in post-Brexit Britain? It feels to me like they're between, I don't know, a stone and a hard place, if you will. They can't go home, and what kind of job's going to be here when Unilever has just chosen to locate its headquarters in the Netherlands, rather than being dually between the UK and the Netherlands? So, young Greeks in post-Brexit Britain, your thoughts, please.
Thanks. There's another question behind you, I think. Yeah.
My background is in psychology and health, okay, and the emphasis on prevention. So my question here is, since so many experts, came up after the referendum, talking about the consequences, dire consequences of the Brexit, and everywhere, ex-ministers, all the experts in the area. I wondered, why didn't all these experts talk about these consequences before the referendum, so that the people who voted for Brexit didn't really think that it's as simple as, say, like, stop the bus, I want to get off. The exit meaning, that it would be much more complicated than that. So they would have saved us all this heartache and all this mess that we are in at the moment. That was my simple question. And also, obviously, since I'm a psychologist, a health psychologist, the psychological damage, this uncertainty that it's doing to people.
Can we take one question at the very back as well, and then we answer all 3 questions, if possible? The gentleman at the very back.
My experience as an English person brought up in a Greek family in London is that what we're now seeing is a kind of reversal in people with Greek spouses wanting to apply for Greek passports for their children and English citizens wanting Greek passports. That's been my experience. Can you comment on that trend, if that is your experience?
Okay, Nico, would you like to take first any of the questions?
Yes, one by one or one at a time?
If you're going to choose,
well,
you don't have to answer all.
I'd like to start with the young Greeks in post-Brexit Britain. I don't know. I don't know what. I don't think they know. I can't have any opinion on that. It depends on what the outcome of the talks will be. But what I do want to note, and I wish I had the figure with me, trust me, in a poll that was held on why Greeks are leaving, young Greeks are leaving Greece, the top answer was because there's no meritocracy in Greece. They don't trust the system there. And that's now. This is after 8 years of crisis, and ostensibly we were going to work to fix things. They have no faith in the system there, so they will try this as far as it can go. That's how I feel, and that's how I feel that my children see that too. They have no qualms about leaving Greece to do better elsewhere. It's a very big problem, I feel, and I come to the second question on that, that it's psychologically, it's very, very damaging, this thing that is happening, this schism that has come into society. We've lived through that since the beginning of Greece. We said, 4 wars, 4 civil wars, and 7 bankruptcies. They don't happen by chance. There's incendiary political climate all the time, and when the outside factors contribute to that, then the society divides very badly. If they don't have outside factors, then the division in itself is very damaging to each individual, and I think you'll be seeing a lot more of this kind of tension coming out, because when arguments are failing, they become more extreme, and at present I think everybody's arguments are failing. The pragmatism that we mentioned, of course, I had sort of said under the surface that I don't believe that it's there anymore, and the comments that I said at the end, that what the British should try to avoid is things that they are already doing. It was kind of a double irony there. If I was misunderstood, I'm sorry. So people are not told the consequences of the political decisions that they take, ever, anywhere. Were the Americans warned about Trump, other than Trump being himself a flashing light? I don't think that everybody who voted for him wanted what they got at the end. And I think that's a problem in our politics generally, and I think that's why we have, if I may, I'm going completely off the topic here. I think the reason why we have such ideological problems is because we don't have ideological relationship with public life. People are not taught these things. They should be taught these things at school, just as they taught everything else. I see that, having raised 3 children, that it was very valuable that they have a grounding in the consequences of actions and the psychological fallout from what is done, either at the very large group level or in the home or in their relationships. So yes, I think the danger is very big from the tensions that come from division.
Yeah. Okay, can I just add? The Greeks, the young Greeks, very good question. Of course, the young Greeks have the opportunity to go anywhere in Europe, which is not going to be the case for the young Brits under the worst case scenario of Jonathan Porter. So consider themselves lucky. They should do, actually. In terms of people wanting to become Greeks, but that's for the same reason. And of course, it's not just Greeks. People want to be, loads of people are digging up the death certificates of their grandmothers in Ireland. And of course, there are loads and loads and loads of them. I think Ireland's, the embassies are inundated completely with requests, and hopefully they charge a reasonable amount and make up, for, Greece should actually do rather well out of this, I hope. We're all Greeks now, which I think would be fantastic if this was the case, and make some money out of that. In terms of the economics, the truth is that the people were told, and they were not believed. The people who said it, that things were going to be difficult and that the economy wasn't going to do well, were dismissed as experts who know nothing. In fact, one of the cabinet ministers said, we have enough of experts who believes anything they say. And the trouble is that even now, when the civil service has produced reports showing the problems in various sectors and in various regions as a result of Brexit, they were kept hidden. And in fact, the person in charge who had commissioned the work, cabinet minister in charge of leaving the EU, said, I don't believe in any modelling that people do, economic modelling, and therefore there's no point in even having these impact assessments published. They have finally published them with lots of things taken out. So in an environment like that, it really is what the ambassador was saying earlier. People have voted despite the economics, or not worrying, or not believing perhaps, I'm not sure, that there would be any economic problems, and voting more on the migration side, nostalgia, a blue passport, I don't know, so taking a new passport rather than the European Union one. So it was not done with logic, but it was done from the heart for those who voted again to leave. And that's a very difficult one to fight against, however much evidence you can produce, and really goes back to the question asked earlier, which is that, you know, it takes a lot of time to change someone's view if they voted from the heart rather than with their brains, and that's the problem we may have. I don't remember, there was another question.
Yeah.
Was that?
No, that was also the, you know,
What was
the
the other
young
one?
Greeks, but I think
The
you
young
answered that.
ones.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, the young Greeks are young, so it's fine. I'm afraid we have run out of time, so we'll need to bring it to a close. I've been advised to give a closing summary, and I know my closing summary is standing between the wine reception and you. So I'll try to keep it very, very short. I'm inspired by the question about the experts, so I will start from there. The experts have given the warnings, both in relation to Brexit, also in relation to the Greek bailouts, but they have been systematically discredited. And then this, and also in the US in relation to policies by the current president there. And this opens up the wider question of the disconnect, if you want, between public attitudes, beliefs, sentiments, allegiances, and, if you want, the global economy, or where the world order was going until a few years back. So people feel more connected to their historical memories. You know, it's not just the blue passport for Britain, it's also what a great empire we were before we joined the European Union. So it's this kind of, you know, I don't know if it's nostalgia or some innate need to connect to something historical. And I think the same can be applied also to the Rust Belt in the US, parts of France, even in Greece. I think, you know, one can develop this argument. On the other hand, you have something which is increasingly complex also for the experts to analyze. And that's why you also have experts who come forward with different predictions and disagreements. I mean, experts always disagree, but especially nowadays. So I think then, given this disconnect and given this challenging environment, in some way you can think of Brexit as a particular event that happened in the UK or in the European Union, and try to understand what are the implications of that, as we have been doing today. Or in some other way, you can see it just as one of the many expressions of a wider global social problem of this kind of disconnect. And I think the implications of these things are similar. I would like to end with a very, very optimistic, to the point of naivety, kind of assertion that in the grand scheme of things, Brexit will do very little to most people in Europe, in Britain, and in the world. Britain will still have trade relations, political relations, security cooperation with most of Europe, as it did also before 1973, and also through other venues, G20, NATO, anything. People will still be able to travel and to occasionally get jobs outside Britain and in Britain, as they do now also. You know, there's people from Brazil who work in Britain. If you go to Brazil, you will find some Britons, or to Argentina even. So, you know, we're not returning to a world where, you know, big walls are erected and people cannot move, and we're going to have an autarkic environment like how Albania was a few decades back. Britain is still going to be open, Europe is going to be open, technology enables mobility, people's attitudes enable mobility, despite what I said just a minute ago. So I think in the grand scheme of things, things will not be so devastating as one may put down on paper in a theoretical exercise, even if the transition period doesn't last forever, as Joe put forward. So I would like to keep this thought just in, you know, to put a smile in faces while they're having a glass of wine. We can discuss more things over the reception, if possible. In the reception time, yeah. Okay. Before you leave and set a glass of wine, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Would like to give the floor to the President. Thank you. Please, before you go, yeah.
Thank you so much. Gosh, how nice.
Thank you very much.
Se Nicola, see?